Okay, I've made my way up through South Dakota, and it's almost 5 o'clock now. I'm heading west towards that area west of Aberdeen. You can see the storm's already fired, but just barely. It's firing out here, and the anvils, as it goes up and hits those higher winds aloft, the anvil spreads out. Chunks, it's not really established yet, so you just get kind of chunks that come out for an anvil before it really finally blows up. But it was on radar now, just barely. You can see down further down the dry line, other towers you'll be able to see here in a second going up.
It's almost 5 o'clock now. You can see it's ambling.
Yeah, you can see the anvils going out there off this storm. And then as soon as I pan over here to the left, you can see further down the dry line. Barely see them down in here. And then there's some way down here. Anyway, the storm's just firing now, so I'm heading out there to it. You can see how this air looks colder. It looks wet and cold. I was surprised how cold it was north of this boundary. Up here, you get the storm's riding on the boundary, and so at some point you cross that boundary. Here, I'm gonna pause this for a second. But as you cross that boundary that it's riding on, you enter that colder air, and sometimes if it's too cold, it just undercuts the storm. If the storm lifts over it, it becomes elevated above that colder air. But at the same point, the storm's turning on that boundary, so it wants to ride along it. And also the low-level jet is really ramming the air north. So the coldness might not be very deep. I could just be in the lowest part of that cold air, and then right above me it could be very warm and just making the storm happy then. So you can see the shape of the storm already. It's got a bit of a horseshoe, and this would be the RFD notch in the middle. It's already trying to cut into the base some. You got this flow from the north all this way into the base. I'm now northeast of the updraft base, looking southwest at it. In its path, you can see the horseshoe shape of that RFD cutting into the base down here, and also up here, your whole big updraft base up here. There goes Steve, screwing up my white balance. Anyway, you can see this curling RFD on the gust front here, and the base wraps around, and that whole big updraft's up here leaning over as the storm comes this way at me, basically. And all this part up here will get pulled south sometimes. You can tell once that starts happening, you might be going to get a tornado, just because you got this whole part bulging forward here as that sinking air comes down, trying to wrap it around, and then this is getting sucked this way. Usually it's once you see that happening, you can tell it's probably getting ready to plan a tornado. Now you see here in a second the cone starting to show itself. There's already a vortex, like pretty much a tornado, a cone aloft, and it's just starting to reach down here. You see it now. The RFD notch is cutting in front. Just wrapped up, and this is all coming south with the tornado in the center.
I knew it would go north of us. I'd stay here.
Of course, there was a shoulder.
Look at it now. Look at it now. I think it might go north, just a hair.
There's a saying that if it's not moving left or right, it's coming at you, and that is true. But what a lot of tornadoes will do is they'll be centering themselves. So if it's moving like this one right now, is moving left to right, that doesn't mean it's not coming at you, because the whole big vortex aloft could be centering, you know. It's centering the lower levels. You imagine that big thing up here, and then this is just kind of getting flung around underneath it until the whole thing gets centered. And so many tornadoes will do this. They'll do little loops. You can see on their damage survey sometimes. They have like little loops to them. And that's what this one's doing. Because at first here, it'll look like it's going to the right, and you'll see it stops, and then it starts going back to the left slowly, and then probably go right a little bit again until that thing gets really established and big. So anyway, it's something to watch for. What do you want to do? gotta pivot back this way, dude.
Maybe we can dive south.
I'm gonna go get up to that highway.
You're going?
Yeah, I'm gonna get up by the highway at least.
Uh,
Huh?
good luck.
Good luck what? What, are you gonna go south?
I'm gonna let it go by. As long as it don't take whatever. We're only, we can go country a mile.
You go south? Anyway, you see this tornado, it's kind of getting skinnied up, it weakens, and it's kind of left in this little bitty area, clouds in the back. It's kind of detached back there now. Well, new base is just forming ahead of it, a bigger, wider area, another updraft plume, you know, one up on that the flanking line, the RFD that comes around. You get another big plume goes up there, and you get another big base ahead of it. And this is going to take over now. It kind of leaves that one out there to die. And this new base will rapidly deepen and wrap up even harder this time. You'll see here in a little bit what happens. It happens real fast. Doesn't take long at all to go from this tornado to the next one, which goes on for 30-some minutes. And for reference, this is the radar around the time of the video right now. Alright, it's at a nice hook from the get-go, but it's getting nicer, and pretty soon there'll be a big ball on the end of it as it produces a large tornado. You see, we're about in this position here, or well, we're right in front of that hook. And here's a satellite image about that same time too. Again, we're probably right in here. The updraft's right in there. You can see it bubbling up, overshooting tops in there a little bit. And the dry line's trying to get going yet. But anyway, you can see the anvil's nice out here and round. All pretty much from that one updraft. Here's the radar loop. Right about there, and now it gets crazy. And then get some rain into it, and it kind of gets messier. It's harder to see the tornadoes. The roads are getting tricky then too, but anyway, it's gonna go crazy right now. Now I'm going east on the highway. I didn't have to go very far north. That's why I moved. I knew I'd get up here and come east ahead of this area as it lifts northeast. You can see the big curl. Here's the base and the curl, the RFD area. And it's drawn that tornado clear up and in, more into the base. So it's just gonna recycle. I mean, it's just gonna produce another big tornado. It just happened to draw this up in there, and it all just turns into one big circulation. Well, you really gotta pick your spots on this whole deal here. Obviously, the size of the cloud base that's rotating can kind of tell you how big the tornado might be. For this is a huge area of this storm now that's rotating. And even the ground circulation, if you see ground circulation, how big it is, it can tell you how big that tornado might be. This one's about to go crazy, and it'll spin faster and faster up here. You'll see in a minute. Again, just by the size of this rotating area, you knew something big was probably going to happen. See this whole area up here will just start spinning. And it won't look real fast down here yet the winds along the outside are just really fast. They'll knock these trees over, and these trees will look like grass here in a minute. But this whole area just starts spinning faster and faster. You start to see rain curtains coming down. It's just like sometimes that RFDs, that sinking air, that sinking dry air on the backside that's cutting around, just kicks it into gear and just ramps it up as it comes around the front of it. You can kind of see that on this. And you'll hear a waterfall sound at that rush too. Really audible. He's already starting to crank in the shape of it's turning into more of a V down low, but also it's leaning. You can see it, the V, the shape of this is almost leaning over this way when it starts, and it takes a little bit to stand upright. But also, I wanted to mention real quick, think about the setup again. This thing's moving pretty much east-northeast, and the flow aloft, the mid-level is like, I think it's 55 miles an hour, 50 knots or so out of the south-southwest. So the storm way up aloft is leaning over and raining way to the north. And meanwhile, it's moving east into easterly or southeast low-level winds. And then the low-level jet up here this way was screaming. I think it's 40 knots, probably increasing past that by now. I know the Ruck model is showing it really ramping up, maybe 60 knots or so. But anyway, you got about 50 mile an hour or more low-level winds from the due south. You can imagine it just feeding low out of this way here, and right up here you're going south, and then way up in the mid-levels it's venting it way aloft. So this thing just going east and just has to spin, and that's what it does. It gets going crazy. I want to mention a few things real quick before I let this go for a while. I think anybody coming east through there couldn't really tell what exactly was going to happen aloft here without seeing how big that bull was and just not knowing what's about to happen. And you'll see this truck here come around. That's Tim Samaras and the Discovery crew, where they just trying to drop a probe in front of this tornado or the area was coming. So they've dropped it and then they move forward, and they think they're far enough forward, but what they don't really know or expect is how big this thing just plants. As soon as it's getting across this road, the whole thing finally comes down. That whole big bowl finally just plants itself right by there, and you can see the wind and everything just going crazy. And you can watch, if this camera like bumps over, you can see a tree here go over and then a tree here go over. And then this stuff over here, all these trees just look like they're grass. Just look like they're being blown like grass in the dirt. But you can see them flee here in a minute when this happens, because they were just a little too close to where that was going to cross. And I don't think they expected it to do what it does here. Also on this part coming up, listen for that waterfall sound. I know there's a bunch of the wind noise across the mic, but when the mic's not out in the wind, you can hear that audible waterfall rushing sound. It's really apparent through this coming up part. Never heard anything like that. What'll happen with a lot of violent supercells, you'll often get what's called a collar cloud. It'll be like a lowered collar-looking cloud forms around the tornado where the whole mesocyclone, the extended area of rotation of the updraft, just extends down. And then this thing is crazy. It's a little unnerving because it spread out and it was kind of almost like right above me, and the rotation's so strong in it, you just look up and you wonder. But you can see this thing form. It's just a big collar cloud that wraps around. You can see the tornado's hard to see because the contrast sucks, and the camera's auto exposure wasn't exposing down. And the rain, obviously. Plus, this was the first day I used this video camera, and it should have been on infinity focus, but it wasn't. So the focus bumps every once in a while. I would switch it back, and then I try and get focus again. So if there's any focus issues, it wasn't supposed to be auto focusing. Now this is an intimidating tornado. You can see the edge of it over here and the edge of it over here. And as I'm going north now, it's almost straight west of me. And this whole time, things weren't moving that slow. So it was a little nerve-wracking. Plus, they're just close to it before, so your nerves get a little build up. And then all the chasers, you keep thinking there's going to be tons of chasers. What I didn't know was a whole good chunk of the chasers were blocked south by the down power poles. So most people weren't even up here yet. So I chose to pull on the pull-off over here instead. I go up a little bit further on this hill. I figured it was packed. Plus, it didn't feel great going a whole hell of a lot further in front of this thing, as big and bad as it is, and as it was closing in. But I would have never expected it was just going to stop just before it gets up there and then sit west of the highway for a while.
Because there's a massive amount of chasers up there. There's no point. Wow. It's 6:30. I don't know where I'm at. I'm west of Aberdeen a little ways. I'm not even gonna go up that hill. Just a massive amount of people up there. Probably don't even pull over. Violent tornado. I'm gonna try and get ahead of this at some point. Sheriff's leaving. Oh my god, look at this. Better get out of there.
Some storms will wrap in rain and get a lot of rain around the hook, but this one was turned so east and getting vented so much to this way and leaning that way. I really don't think the rain problems were from really hardly any wrapping issues. What it was from these guys that pop up here and moved into it. That's what that first heavy rain probably was about this time. If you watch this loop, just a constant barrage that starts to pop off and run into it, just rains on it. Boom, 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 boom. I guess I do have to correct myself on that rain wrapping thing. This is about almost 650, and Bowdle, the big wedge tornado, is ending by now, and the first storm hadn't ran into it yet. I guess it can make sense, even though it's vented well aloft and it's leaning over. Once that updraft's spinning fast enough, it's still going to probably grab some of its precip before the precip can be blown away, especially certain heights. So that was all rain wrapping, because here's the first storm going to run into it. I'm trying to watch what happens with this hook as I try to frame it forward a little bit by playing. You can see it's in here, and the new one will stay in that same general area to kind of come out of the messes as it keeps going. See how it went through there. Still going through there now. The new area is there. Wrapped up. Now it's going to be really too big of a mess. Still probably doing something through there. Try that again. Gets ran into it. It's doing a tornado now. The next tornado is happening about now. See how that hook's still in there? And it's even getting bigger in there. Sometimes it can just eat storms well and come out of it. Still eating storms in it. Still trying to do a hook. It's 650 now. Going east of Bowdle, where that tornado just was. Starting a new one already. Trying to do 1,000 things at once and dry stuff off. Almost 7 o'clock. In the next part coming up, I'll be going northbound right in front of the supercell. And the whole big updraft you'll see is pretty much just this area right in here, where your gust front would go down like this, and any inflow notch, like inflow features would be here, and all the big heavy precipits getting blown to the north and northeast from that huge tall updraft that's pretty much just right in this area. That's where your storm is. North of Roscoe. I'm east of the supercell again, so on the radar I just showed that hook is right in here, the ball of the hook, and all the heavy precip of that storm on radar is off to the right of the screen, being blown out from your big tall updraft. You can see there's kind of a lot of rain getting into the RFD area now. It's getting colder, a lot more outflow driven. It gets harder to do long-lived tornadoes a lot of the times when that's going on. See the little inflow tail, little beaver tail, I guess. About 7 o'clock. Now for structure. If I can find a place to pull over.
It's doing it again. It's 7:20. A few miles north of Roscoe.
I'm now more northeast of that storm. You can see how huge it is. Clear back here, this part's still the same storm, the round updraft base. Comes around off the screen and back on the screen, around, wrapped up in here. See a lot of rain coming from those storms off the dry line now, running into it this way. You see this V shape. There's a tornado right there. I don't know how strong it ever was, but there's definitely a tornado in there from time to time. See the notch, and that's the thing. Just like all the other storm supercells, it's always in the same area, pretty much. Sometimes you can get some to form in the middle. They get their own notch and kink. You get a new tornado out here. So a lot of these will cycle that way, where they'll wrap one clear back in there and start it back there, and then it'll die. They'll get left behind and die, and then sometimes you'll get a new sharp RFD cut in the base out here, and then this whole thing will fatten up, rotate around, and start to do the next tornado. Just keep cycling like that sometimes.
Hopefully I stay chaser free right where I'm at. I'm gonna stay back by this road. Try this again. I don't want to go back on the other side where I was.
The problem here north of Roscoe became road options. There were no good road options to go east now. And the storm at the time just looked like it was struggling. So much cold air in the middle in the RFD, and it looked cold. It didn't look like it was wrapping around nice flat base area, just kind of pushed out. But the thing is, these storms, when they got stuff ramming into them, think of cold air, a whole bunch of rain way up aloft, falling into an updraft. It's just going to put cold air up there into the updraft and just kind of cool that warm air that's coming up. It just kind of messes with the updraft for a while. So the storms can be weaker for a while until that stops, and then they can take off again. And I think that's sort of what's happened here, maybe, because it wasn't really tornadoing anymore. But as soon as it's passing by me now, I'm looking south. I'm actually looking southeast here, but the road goes south. As soon as it's going by now, it starts to act more and more wrapped up. The winds coming into it look stronger. These winds are going stronger. And then at the end of this clip, you'll see the northwest winds pulling in the back are really strong. So you can tell it was wrapping up again. And what it was wrapping up again. It started to produce more tornadoes just east of here. And quite a few chasers actually went east on some gravel roads and got stuck. And it was producing tornadoes coming at them. It just got in a big mess out there. But it was producing several tornadoes. It had more than one down at once. But it was really a big coil mess wrapped up in there. I can't say I regret not trying to go east with it, because I would have got stuck too, I'm sure.
Sick of rain. I should probably go north.
I'm looking southwest here. This highway goes south. And now the storm's trying to cross this highway going eastward. You can tell it was wrapping up harder now because you get stronger winds coming into it. And now you can see up here, this part, this is the back of that updraft. If you got a big round updraft, there's the back of it. It's going to wrap back around this way. And if you could put the hook on radar, the hook is coming around, it's thinner. The back of the hook is thin right here. Visually, you've seen a hook echo. The back, that's the thin part, the part going around and curling. Well, this is that area. You can see light through there through a lot of this time, where the heavier core is further up this road to the north and then to the east. Then the ball, that hook echoes inside the middle of that storm, but the updraft's all around up here, and it's really wrapping around now. And I wasn't eager to drive down there even now. It looked like it was probably crossing, but it was close enough to the highway. Just the way this was wrapping up and the winds were strengthening into it, you knew it was probably getting its act together again. So you just give it some more time to cross that highway before going south, because there was no other option other than to wait here.
Yeah, about to get hail. the hail, most likely.
Okay, I'm essentially right in here in the precip making up the hook coming around. You get the big updraft right here, basically in here, spinning around this way. So you can imagine precip getting pulled in around the back of the storm into the RFD area, the notch, pulling it around. You can almost see this on here. You can almost see these bands coming down because the big round updraft, the back of it's right here. So you can see if I'm right in the hook looking southwest, kind of looking right here, you can almost see that band of precip get pulled around, down and around. So you get all this flow and wind and momentum coming around the back. You can kind of see how that is on radar, and then the size comparisons too. Probably worth looking at Aberdeen sounding from that night again at 7 p.m. just in front of this storm. Again, the temperature lines go this way: 10 Celsius, 20 Celsius, 30 Celsius. And the top of your storm was up here where the temperature, the actual air temperature and your rising air parcel become the same, and then your air is warmer than your rising air. So your storm was up here 40-some thousand feet or so. But anyway, we want to look down here. If you imagine things cooling off with a loss of heating, your air temp, the red line, the actual air temperature down low is going to start cooling off and going this way. So you don't want your virtual parcel starting off colder. You want it to be warmer so it stays warmer than the actual air temp. Remember, this is all warmer than the actual air temperature. But if your low levels start cooling off with loss of heating, in order to keep a surface-based storm, you're going to need to keep cooling the cap level. Because if this doesn't get cooled down, your temperature is going to be over here, and it's going to be warmer as it goes up. And it wasn't really cooling off this day, so things weren't going to do as well after dark without the heating of the ground. They'll become more elevated in nature above a cooler, stable, lower level. But if you had your ground cooling off a little bit, but you had a lot of cold air coming in the mid levels and around 700 millibar, 10,000 feet, if that was cooling off, your air temperature line, your air would be getting colder and colder, so your rising parcel would be warmer than it. It's just a balance. But usually once night comes and you lose the heating, after a while of cooling off, things to become more and more elevated. If you got a strong storm and you got a low stable layer, that storm could be forcing the air ahead of it upward to where it is warmer than the surrounding air. It could be forcing, this air, just if it forces it hard enough, and if it's too cool, it doesn't want to rise because there's a little bit of warm air above it. If it forces it up there, then it gets in the colder air where it can rise on its own. That can happen too, but it can only do so much once your low levels start cooling off.